This is chapter 12, section 1. I'm not sure the exact chapter name, but it's China. Okay. Good story.
My throat is like, is this a throat?
Hmm?
Is this chapter 12? Chapter 12?
Section 1. I'm sort of skipping chapter 11, section 5. Because to be perfectly honest, I want to get to World War II a lot, and at this rate we're not going to. So, that kind of pace.
Yeah, I'll go with it.
Everybody likes talking about World War II.
I don't know what's on the
So, some terms for you. The first term, sphere of influence, refers to an area that one of the European powers controls. Think of it like gang turf. Basically, they control it. No other European powers are allowed into it. If they do try to come into it, they're going to get a beating. In addition, anybody that lives in that area has to support the controlling power, the Europeans, through trade concessions and things like that. So it's a type of imperialism, if you will. An indemnity refers to a payment that is given for losing a war. So basically, there's always this question of who pays for the war. Wars are very expensive things. So we've got to find a way of paying for it. Traditionally, the way this was achieved was by basically stealing stuff. You know, if you took over a town, you would rob it after you took it from somebody else. It's called sacking. So, for instance, when the Visigoths sacked Rome, they basically stole everything that wasn't nailed down. Of course, that's an uncivilized war practice. So, in the civilized world, in the 19th century, we use what's called an indemnity, which basically means you still have to pay, only it's formalized through a treaty. Now, what this does is it weakens the state that has to pay the indemnity because it's losing money. It also kind of humiliates it. It plays into this whole social Darwinist attitude that's so popular. And so what happens is indemnities sort of act as a kind of a source subject between countries. If the country is forced to pay an indemnity, it tends to have negative relationships with those countries later on. So we're going to see the same thing happen in China. Another important concept is to understand how law works. If you were to go to, well, let me ask you this question. How many of you guys are considering going on the Europe trip? Continuing to Europe. Okay. Highly recommended. Great experience. One thing you have to keep in mind. Whenever you go to another country, you are susceptible to that country's laws. So you have to follow that country's laws, whether you know them or not. So, well, that's just common sense stuff. But there are some things maybe you should be aware of. Like, for instance, in Europe, it's not too terribly different. But, you know, there might be specific laws in specific areas that you're not used to. I don't have any specific examples of that. But, like, for instance, in the reverse, like, say, a foreign exchange student would come here from, say, Italy or Germany, what have you, what's the drinking age in those countries? Yeah. So, can they drink here? Okay. So, they are susceptible to our laws, even though in their laws, okay. Does that make sense? Okay. Extraterritoriality means that you are not held subject to the laws of the country you are in. So, for instance, England is going to force its colonies to listen to English law. And the importance of this isn't so much just what laws are being tried here, but also it's instead of being tried in whatever nation you're in, you are tried back in England. And what happens is the courts in England tend to really favor English people. So if you have, for instance, someone in China who maybe was taken advantage of business-wise by an English person, it goes back to England. The judge in England is probably going to side with the English person, even if it's totally not right. Yeah.
this is kind of about that. But like, say you like you were in like England and you like killed someone and they were like after you and you went to our embassy, couldn't they like not arrest you if you went to the embassy?
Well, yes, if you get asylum in the embassy. However, that being said, there's going to be a discussion between the embassy and the American side of things, and it's really then up to the American government whether you get extradited or whether you get sent back home or what the deal is. So yes, you can, but it's not as easy as all that necessarily. For instance, like NCIS and things like that will have sometimes loot like, oh, they went to the embassy, we can't touch them, we got to go. And that's, I mean, yes, that can happen, but you know, it's not very common. Okay. You guys know what opium is? It is a drug made from poppy seeds. And actually, most of our pain medicines are opioids. They're made from opium. You know, things like Vicodin are opioids, and it's a painkiller. I'll put it up there. It's a little yellow. Sorry. It's very addictive. And from a business standpoint, that's fantastic. You know, the best thing in the business world you can have is a product that somebody needs to have. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, if you want to make money off of somebody, selling a product that people get addicted to is fantastic. Of course, you have to be somewhat morally bankrupt to use that business practice. But consider how much money somebody who is addicted to a product will spend on something. So let's take two very similar products. Let's take eating a fast food, whatever restaurant of your choice, but we're going to limit to say about $5. You know, most fast food restaurants you can get like a $5 meal deal. Sure, yeah, okay, and a pack of cigarettes. All right. So, how often do we eat out each week?
And like all of us on average?
No, like you as a single person.
One.
Once, maybe twice, something like that. Okay, it's $5, $10. Fair enough. $5, $10 per week times 4 weeks equals anywhere between, what is that, $20 and $80 per month. Multiply it out per year is what, on the high end, $960, and on the low end, that's $240 per year. What's that?
You could do like if you spend like $10 a week, you just do $520.
Sure. Good. Now, consider that. Let's now look at cigarettes. Okay, the average smoker smokes about 2 to 3 packs a week. Yeah, so that's $10 to $15 per week. So let's just, for argument's sake, the low end. That's let's see, that's $40 a month. It's $480 a year. Yeah, $480 a year. On the low end, my grandfather, when he was in his heavy addiction of smoking, was smoking 2 packs a day. Yeah, that's addiction. So you can do the math there. It's hugely expensive. Now, another friend of mine ended up buying a truck because he quit smoking. Like he could pay for a truck payment for what he was normally spending on his cigarettes. So you can see why addiction amplifies expenditures. Yes? So the British didn't really have any products that the Chinese wanted, except for opium. Opium had been used in China for centuries because it's a painkiller. But then people started taking it recreationally. They got addicted. By the 1830s, opium addiction was crippling the country. It was so prevalent that the Emperor of China asked the English to stop selling it. stopped bringing to the country, and the English refused because it was hugely lucrative. They ended up fighting a war over it, which China lost, and resulted in some of the major problems that are going to face China in the 19th century. One of which is the fact that they have to pay this indemnity. Also, it's going to cause a lot of anti-foreigner sentiment because basically the English are going to force China out of isolationism against their wishes, and it's going to kind of feel like they're being invaded both culturally and economically, which they were, and are going to fight back. But the other thing with addiction in terms of the business model is it's incredibly effective. I mean, consider tobacco and alcohol companies. Their advertisements are almost always aimed at teenagers. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways they can do that. They can, the old method is make it look cool, things like that. And that actually is one of the big issues with teenage smoking is that it's not so much the coolness factor, but it's a sense of rebellion that's easy to do. Teenagers like to rebel. It's just part of how things are, But this is seen as something, well, that's harmless, I can get away with it, and it's not going to affect me too much, and boom, you become addicted. You know what I mean? This is why drug dealers tend to give out drugs for free at first. Get you addicted, and then now you got to pay. It's a bait and switch. And it's hugely effective. Because the other thing is that certain drugs are deadlier than others. That's just fact. And the problem is that when someone uses something like, say, marijuana, and they think, well, I'm just going to try meth once. Or I'm just going to use heroin one time. That's all it takes. That's the reason they call it a gateway drug. You know what I mean? So, ultimately, this is why the British use that method, and this is why companies today use that method. Because addiction is more than just a physical thing. It changes behavior because you will start doing things to get a fix that you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise. So it's a guaranteed source of income. So this is why the British were defending it as well. And ultimately, I think is sort of ironic as well because, basically England's the drug dealer of the world at this point, And, like I said, opium becomes hugely problematic for countries where it's being utilized. Even in the United States, it became widespread. Opium dens, which is where the drug was smoked, kind of sprung up in seedier areas of town, and sometimes what happens, actually kind of frequently, is you go to the opium den and you buy your stuff and you get a cot and I kind of rented space and you'd smoke it, get out of your mind while you were incapacitated. If you were lucky, they would just rob you. If you were unlucky, they would sell you into slavery. There are buildings all throughout the United States where this happened. There's one in Charlestown, South Carolina, where there was a false bottom, and what they would do is they would get women, and they would smoke the opium, they'd sell them into prostitution. Yeah, there's I think it was, what was that show on History Channel they're talking about it. But, or you were at the building. That's cool, yeah. One of them, which one were you at? Do you remember the name of it?
No, but I remember there was like a little one in the bottom of the courthouse.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was seen as a moral problem. And what's interesting is they really blame the foreigners for this in America. This is where racism comes into effect. Because it was believed that these foreigners were using these drugs to have sex with white women as the moral thing. So basically, drug laws are passed not because drugs destroy people's lives or that sort of thing, so that these people, these other races, wouldn't come into the country. So opium was banned so the Chinese wouldn't come in. Marijuana was banned because the Mexicans would come in. It was all aimed at racism, and that's fascinating because we think of the moral. The same thing happened with abolition and everything else like that. It's almost never about what's morally right as much as what is economically convenient. That's kind of sad in a way, but it's what it is. 1850s. There was a popular rebellion called the Taiping Rebellion, which ultimately fails. But it's one of these first, major problems facing the Chinese government because basically, they were at a tremendous disadvantage, both technologically and politically. It was still a feudal state, essentially, based on Confucian ideals. And so they basically had a choice, whether to reform in the traditional way and try to basically, all right, we've had all these other changes going on, we need to go back to the way it originally was and kind of do what was good back in the golden age, or change things in a liberal manner and do something totally different. And there are actually two different individuals that tried these different methods. Xi, which tried traditional reform, and Guangzhou, who tried modern reform. And ultimately both failed, but for different reasons. Traditional reform failed because it failed to take into consideration all the advantages that had been happening during the Industrial Revolution. I mean, the fact was, the systems that were developed were better, hands down. And so what happened is by going with this old school way of doing things, they basically didn't fix anything. When Guangzhou tried to change it in a more liberal way, he met a lot of opposition because, one, the people who were in power, that were empowered by the old system, didn't like losing their power. And secondly, it ran into an issue because the new ideas were seen as foreign, and foreign culture taking over our culture, and it was kind of this anti-foreign sentiment because the British forced them out of isolation, and though the relationship they did have was very negative, so the situation didn't go very far. Actually, their stories are kind of interesting too, because Xi was the favorite concubine of the Emperor of China, who ended up basically becoming empress because she had a son by the emperor who she was able to sort of convince him to make the next emperor, and also through political alliances she had made. And from there, she basically was regent over the reign of Guangzhou, and then pretty much had him exiled and was going to have him executed. However, he got out of that, ended up taking control from his mother and had her banished. So nice, relationship we have there. And Guangzhou becomes emperor. After that, there's another revolution that ends up establishing the Chinese Republic, but they also are having issues in terms of maintaining a balance with the Europeans, and another rebellious attitude from within that ends up actually taking over the country and establishing the modern People's Republic of China, which was, of course, the rebellion led by Mao Zedong. All these are tied together. That's Xi in Guangzhou, and Sun Yat-sen, who in 1911 became the first president of the new government. So isolationism, we have to understand that it's more than just sticking one's head in the sand. This is something I think people misunderstand about isolationism. Isolationism is an attempt to remain free from outside control, not be bothered by outside concerns. The United States was isolationist for a good part of its history because it saw it as not wanting to get involved with other countries' problems, but also to avoid kind of outside influences. To remain independent, so to speak. For instance, China, it's often oversimplified as saying that it thought it had the perfect society and didn't want to change it. It's to some extent true, but it goes deeper than that because the world was in a state where it was constantly shifting. It was a big problem. And so just kind of isolating oneself from that meant it wouldn't have to be embroiled in these same issues. ultimately, they're not able to enforce it because they don't have the military strength, but the idea is to kind of sound it to some extent. I mean, to put it in this perspective, saying that the United States needs to stop going into other countries and just needs to mind our own business, that's isolationist. So it's kind of understandable from some extent. Now, the Treaty of Nanjing is what ends the Opium War. And it does three things. First, it grants Britain extraterritoriality. Second, it gives them the territory of Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, by the way, was part of Britain until the 1990s. So we're talking a fairly modern piece of event. Which, by the way, out of curiosity, you guys are mostly born in 97, yeah?
98.
98. All right, so fair enough. So you guys will be seniors in 2 more years, okay.
Yeah.
So that means that in 3 years, 4 years technically, I suppose, our seniors will have been born after 9/11,
Ah.
Wait, what?
if my math is correct.
Yeah.
How can you be?
Because my sister, is gonna be a freshman next year. So yeah.
Oh, like I thought you meant like the seniors now. Yeah,
4
that's
years.
that's what I thought you said.
No.
I was so confused.
My sister was born 2000. She's gonna be freshman.
Mhm.
Yeah. So.
So she. Oh, it happened in 2001, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So then they would have been 4.
Oh.
So it'd be like the 7th graders now.
So it's like 7 years.
Something like that.
Some grades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is weird.
Yeah, something like that. Not quite on around, but it's coming up before too much longer. Is my point.
Weird.
And
So it's like history, did it? Like.
Yeah.
Before they were. I know, but we were like.
you were alive.
Yeah.
We lived during the 9/11.
Every single day is history.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the point that sometimes gets lost because it's too much. You know, talk about every person their entire life since the beginning of time. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of experiences. You know. So that's why it's kind of good that we have social media in a way. It's a if you think about it, if someone in 1,000 years would be like, what was life like during 2014? Look at Facebook records. What was going on? As dumb as that seems, as much as we complain about people being like, had a sandwich day, things like that, seriously, it's historical records.
Mm-hmm.
That also means that, someone in 1,000 years might be like, somebody has switched their relationship status to it's complicated. Stuff like that.
What if we say hashtag salty? They're gonna have no idea what's happening.
Oh no, they will, because it'll be recorded. It's already been recorded.
That's weird.
It's just
It's cool.
it'll be
No.
horribly
We
antiquated.
made history, guys.
We're making history in this classroom right now by just talking about this.
True story.
By talking about us making
That's what we had
history.
the other day from Carl Sagan. The universe is or you are the universe experiencing itself. It's just kind of neat to take a moment and think about it for a second.
We're on the world experiencing.
Universe
Why do you do this
experiencing.
for, like universe.
Mhm.
Experiences.
Because you are the universe.
Aw, no.
But no, this is also going to be on YouTube, so, somebody 1,000 years from now will be able to listen to this YouTube thing and be like, whoa, yes, we're talking to you, Dave.
What if his name really is Dave?
So he's going to have a heart attack at them.
No, they're gonna be like, Dave, they were talking about.
So disappear at the pearly white gates. Oh my God, you trolled me so hard.
Emily.
That's just shot in a million right there.
Oh man.
Anywho, I skipped over if you want to go back, but there's an image of it. Okay, we already talked about some. Yeah, moving on. Anyways, Boxer Rebellion, by the way. Do you guys remember that all from geography? Hashtag no.
No, dude.
T, ruining things for you.
What was that?
It was oddly appropriate. Did anybody? Nobody? All right, so basically there's another popular rebellion that occurred in China, only in this case it was an anti-foreign, because anti-foreign sentiment, the Europeans had become involved so much in the government and had replaced so much of the culture that it was a backlash against what the Europeans were bringing in, kind of a resurgence of traditional Chinese values. The problem is they didn't have weapons, because weapons were illegal. So what do they use? Their fists.
Oh, so that's where that comes from.
Well, no, and that's actually a common misconception. Is that everyone in China or everyone throughout they know kung fu or they no. Although one branch of kung fu did emerge out of the Buddhist monasteries having to defend themselves from basically country bandits. But it was a martial arts tradition, not necessarily kung fu, but all different forms. Ultimately, this is why the British call it the Boxer Rebellion, because think about it. As far as martial arts are concerned, the West, it's the only one that's prominent. Boxing. Although what's interesting about that is boxing then wasn't boxing today. For instance, there were different sets of rules in boxing. American rules boxing there was no rules. So, for instance, it was perfectly legitimate for a boxer to take his thumbs and gouge out his opponent's eyes. In fact, some boxers actually sharpened their fingernails for that purpose.
Oh,
Yep.
it's disgusting.
They would
Blood
have
sports.
their opponents useless so that they could get them out of the way.
Yep. True story, bro.
Darby, you just got a roll today. Yeah, Darby's not.
She was killing it in theology. She
I
knew all
love
these
to
terms.
sleep. And I looked over the words because my mom made me.
That's all.
Anyway,
Help me with getting
so the thing to consider, guys, is, look at the United States. Why do we have the Second Amendment? You guys know what the Second Amendment is, right?
I did at the time. I forgot. I forgot the amendment.
The right to bear arms.
Yes, that
Oh,
one.
yes, I recall.
Why do we have that amendment? From
The government.
the government. A lot of people say stuff like, oh, it's, defend your home. No. It's so that we as a people can overthrow our governments. Because keep in mind, when the framers of the Constitution were writing the Constitution, they were putting down protections from what happened before. We fought against our own government because it was oppressive. And what was the first thing they tried to do when a rebellion started kind of breaking out? They didn't have weapons. So it's a protection so that can't happen. Now, the only problem with that is by that own logic, then I should be able to go buy a nuclear bomb. The government has nuclear bombs. I need a nuclear bomb to
Oh,
protect me from them.
No.
Exactly, that's kind of nuts, isn't it? So where do we draw the line? Well, that's the interesting debate and where the balance is, because if you think about it, the framers of the Constitution, when they were writing this, the most powerful military weapon on the battlefield at the time was the Brown Bess musket. So you don't have issues of like school shootings. Guy that goes in with his dad's musket and pow, and now has to reload. By the time he gets reloaded, he's swarmed. It doesn't work. They could not conceive of a world where we're using automatic machine guns, bombs from orbit, basically all this stuff. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, for goodness sakes, we are releasing this month the first battleship armed with lasers.
That's like kind of weird. It's creepy.
It actually makes perfect technological sense. It's just like,
Why do you need that?
well, there's actually a few reasons why that's good. Because consider it this way, if you're using a weapon that uses explosives, like traditional cannons, if your ship gets hit, all that explodes. It sinks you. There's nothing explosive. It's genius, actually. But it's just like, we're living in the future. It's really cool. But also kind of funky. Like think about where weapon technology will take us in 300 years.
Lines out of our eyes.
Well, I don't know why we'd do that. I mean, I guess maybe.
We probably won't have cell phones. We'll probably just have like a little chip, like programmed into our
That's
head.
probably likely. You'll just be hooked to
Like-
the internet.
Yeah. through your head, and you just like think to call someone and then you just.
But then
You don't even have to. You just communicate to someone without speaking. Why would you need to speak? You communicate to anyone in the world anytime without actually having to open your mouth.
what if you
Weird. I like to talk.
But what if you like dreamed about it? You know what I mean?
Like,
Yeah.
what if you start, like, thinking and, like, you don't even realize, like, switching your head is on and you're, like, telling everybody this?
Yeah.
These are interesting questions, and we don't know the answer to them. There are futurists who have debated this whole thing. But my point is, guys, not to get too off on a tangent on futurism, but rather to bring it back to the idea of that, laws are made hundreds of years ago and can't possibly incorporate all of the facts. That's why the best thing they did was create a constitution that could change. It could evolve as time evolves. So, again, that's kind of the importance of a changing government. Anyways, this little cartoon shows the it's an interesting little situation, the kind of attitude that people had regarding imperialism in the 19th century. What's going on here?
It looks like a pizza.
It is a pizza.
I don't know, China,
Does it
dude
take China?
doesn't want it to happen to
Pretty much, yeah. So who's everybody here right here? China is what it says.
It
China.
says the Queen Victoria, right?
Queen Victoria of England, next to,
Um,
remember the spiky helmet?
oh, I don't remember.
What country? Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. Yeah, Russia, the Tsar. That is actually, I don't remember her name. She's French, actually. And then down here is information. You never look like that. That's very much a Western, sort of racist stereotype. He's a samurai, and Burmeji was known for wearing Western garments. So, but anyways, it's an interesting thing because it's literally carving up the pie between the various Europeans and the people. Like, wait, what's going on? This is our country. It's like we don't care. We're doing it anyways. Back here for just half a second. So what is China like as a sphere of influence? Well, first, it resents foreign control. There's going to be a lot of anti-Western sentiments during the 19th and early 20th century because, frankly, they deserve it. We went and stole a country. So this resistance is going to take time. At first, it fails, i.e. the Boxer Rebellion. Eventually, it grows in strength. And then after a 37-year civil war, the People's Republic of China is developed based off of communist trends with some support from the Soviet Union. And we have this really kind of interesting dichotomy evolve in Asia. But we'll get to that another day. That's it for today, guys. Yes.